Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another update on the most anticipated game of all time. It's Total War Devin developer log for month 2-ish. Not exact. It might actually be a bit less than a month, but I've just got to a point this morning where I finally stopped one of the features glitching out, and I thought I might as well do it now before I go ahead and mess up something else by trying to develop something else. So let's show it in a working state, shall we? So last time we had a blue T on a green background with some grey squares. And I think I said one of my main priorities was to develop some sort of map. And I'm pleased to say we've now got a map. It's not finished, but we've got something. So this is Unity, by the way, that I'm looking at. If you wondered what developing in Unity looks like, this is what it looks like. You've got stuff around the edges. Down here's various code files that I'm using. And what else have we got in here? If you open up some of these, you can see some of the little images and icons that are used in the game are in here. Here's some of the unit cards, all looking pretty good. So yeah, you basically have all your files down there. Here's stuff in the current level that I'm looking at, a level in this case being a battle. And over here's fairly detailed information about all these things, which is not important. So, what I can do is play the game. Let's have a look at it. So look at this, we've got a map. This beautiful map is a tile map. So the way it works is we have a palette of various kinds of squares. So it's just a series of squares connected together, and then by sort of manually drawing it onto an image file in such a way, you can make it look like some sort of map. So the tile map isn't finished by any means, and it has lots of weird issues, which will be sorted out in the future. You can see there's some weird lines appearing in between these squares. These things don't match up, and you see up here where we've got some water. These squares aren't meant to be there. And you can also see how I ended up dealing with height. I mentioned last time, I was wondering how are we going to have height from a 2D perspective. So what we've got is this idea of just having these kind of stripes, with a light stripe and a dark stripe representing sides of a raised area. So like the sort of bottom and right have a brighter bit, and the top and left have a darker bit representing slopes. It's kind of like a shadow. The idea stolen from the old close combat games on the PC, if anyone's heard of those, and it kind of works. It also stolen from Age of Empires, as you might notice. So like Age of Empires does this, where you have, in order to have the hills be tileable, so you can have the hill be as high or low as you want. You have to have lots of different strips of the slope strip going up. So it kind of looks like a step-up hill, like in good old Age of Empires days. But anyway, that'll do for now. The good thing about a tile map is you can always change it later. So if we decide we have a better idea for the hills, what we can do is go to the tile map, change what the tiles look like, and it will remember where all the tiles are meant to be and just automatically remake the map. That's probably a bit confusing. Why don't I've got it right here in fact. Here's the full map being made in a program called Tiled, funnily enough. And here is the tile map I keep making reference to, created by my lovely wife on my behalf, because she's a pro artist, with much more to come. I'll even pay you. Anyway, so you've got basically lots of these tiles that we can use to make our map. So why don't we make a change to the map as a demonstration? Because there is actually a change I realise is needed. It's here, you can see we've got a river with a road, and there's meant to be a bridge across it, and I forgot to put it in. So down here I've done it. Got various bridges. So why don't we, as an exciting demonstration of the new exciting map making technology, put a bridge here. Anyway, we're off topic. I'm trying to make a bridge, aren't I? So I need to go to my bridge layer. That's the point I was eventually making. There's lots of layers, and the bridges are on their own layer so that they're on top of the roads. So now I go to my tile map, I start looking for bridge pieces. So there's one that's the bottom of a bridge. Put it there, so you can see it's sort of just over the road. It sort of shadows the road a little bit, and that's thanks to me putting it on a layer that's on top of the road. And I'm also going to need a sort of straight piece like that and a top piece like that. Hooray! So that's step one. The bridge is now there, but it's still just a picture of a bridge. We need the game to actually treat it as a bridge and be passable. And that's where the real fun begins. By the way, I should also show you, we've got a height map. Because of course, although I've drawn hills onto the map, when I put that into the game, it's just a picture of a hill. Like, the game doesn't know what each pixel of the image actually is. So it needs to treat them differently in some way. And the way we've sorted that is with a height map. So every square is given a number, just drawn over the top as a visual representation here for developer purposes. But when the map is loaded into the game, it looks at, or specifically it looks at, here's the height map. Up there you can see each height map number, which is 2, it says ID 2. You can read those IDs. And long story short, it knows how high each tile is off the ground. So you can see I've got sort of the ground level is 2 for no particular reason. Doesn't matter what the numbers are, only what the relative differences are. And then you can see it goes up to 3 as you go up one step of hill, up to 4, then up to 5, and there's a 6 up there as well. So that's the way in which the game will know that areas are higher than other areas and adjust the movement points to move between them accordingly, and then when there's combat, adjust any combat modifiers accordingly as well. And now, we've got a bridge. Oh yeah, so we've changed the map. And here are some units. Last time we only had like 1 or 2. Now we've got all kinds of units going on, well specifically 3 kinds of units going on. So before I explain what they are, let's test our bridge. In the process of testing the bridge, I'm going to end up demonstrating all the exciting new features that I've made, so we might as well go through them now, and the culmination of everything that I've done will be to show that this army can get to the other side of the bridge without the game crashing this time, he says. Not that that's ever happened. So what the hell is going on here? We've got a mess of not just blue tees, but we've got that, blue kites, and blue, like, tacks. Basically what I decided was we needed some way to differentiate how the different unit types would look. Like rather than having every unit be a T shape, which is what the game inspiring this style, Dynasty Tactics, did, we need the shapes to look different in some way, so you can just know what class of unit they are, just to help out, because otherwise you'd have to click on them and say, what's that, and sort of keep remembering. So basically the shape represents its type, the type being something like melee, or sorry, this is melee. Melee is a T. You've got shock infantry, which is a sort of spiky T, and we've got ranged infantry. This is long range, and I'll eventually have a different shape for short range to differentiate between things like archers and things like javelins, because you may need to know that those two types are different in order to strategize quickly. So that's pretty much all there is to it, just these 3 types at the moment. There'll be a load more. There's going to be cav and special things and engineers or whatever. And you may also notice that they're not all equal. Look at these 4 units. You've got thicker borders, then a sort of thinner border, and then an even thinner border. So this is to represent the unit's weight. So I thought we also needed a way, as well as the troop class, to know vaguely how powerful that unit is just by looking at it. Now one idea I could steal from Dynasty Tactics is to make the T bigger or smaller. So in that game, as a unit became weaker from fighting, the shape actually took up less of the space it was occupying. Like technically it still counted as filling the whole space, sorry, but it was very small by the end, so you could know that that unit was insignificant in the grand scheme of things. So we might steal that. And the other idea I tried to put in was have just the line around the edge be thick to represent its weight. So thicker means it has higher stats, and then size may represent the amount of strength that actually has left in the battle. So that way you get more information at a glance without having to do things like actually having unit models on the screen, which is of course out of the window. So what else can we have a look at? We need to demonstrate movement. That's probably the main thing that I worked on, as well as having the map exist, is working on the way in which units move. So last time we saw you click on a square, it goes there and it draws a line to that square. So let's do a similar thing now. I'm going to get this guy, Devin, to walk to there. So as before, we have a little arrow saying which direction we should face once we arrive. So let's, I don't know, face that way. So you can see we've got a minor difference. We've still got the line, but now it shows you these little pointers, and that's how many turns it's going to take to reach each point in the line. I think this is going to be very handy for just working out what's going on. And you see a little ghost of the unit shape appears where it's going to be and where it's going to be facing. And you can see it's got a number over the ghost as well. And if I unselect this unit by clicking away, the ghost stays there with only the number of turns that's going to take to arrive at its showing. So you need to have all these things disappear, because when you're moving lots of units at once, you'll have so many numbers all over the screen that this is going to be annoying. So it just shows you, if you don't have anything selected, here's where your army is going to show up, and here's how many turns it'll take for each bit of the army to actually get there. So now if I say action, my unit's going to start moving there. Let's give it a few turns. And as you can see, it's counting down, so now it needs 2 turns to reach it. It's selected again, so it needs 1 turn to reach there. It's reached at the end of that turn, 1 more turn to reach its final destination. Delightful. So that was movement system development number 1, just making it a little bit more user-friendly, basically. So the next thing I added for movement is some way to differentiate between running and walking, and that's what this area, which you might have noticed, is supposed to be about. So here we're going to have the unit control buttons. So in Total War, like say in Medieval 2, you might remember that was here, where you'd have like run, fire at will, skirmish, guard mode. So things that basically apply to every unit, regardless of what it is, that you just need to configure. So they'll probably go across here. This bar may even end up extending across the whole screen to have all the unit specific abilities in it, like shield wall or whatever. Or maybe unit specific ones will be in a different box just above it. Who knows, can experiment, doesn't ultimately matter too much. So anyway, I've got this terrible play / fast forward icon that I made myself, yay, to represent running and walking. We can always change that later on. And we've added in here a bar. This bar is the unit's stamina, and you see this little icon there showing what state it's currently in. So we're currently walking with Devin here. So let's switch Devin to running mode. So now he's running, you see his speed stat increased and the little icon changed. I think this was new as well, adding in the level of the unit being shown underneath his picture. Not terribly exciting, but there you go. So now that it's running, well, in fact let's do an experiment to show the difference. So we're going to start here, and I'm going to say walk towards the bridge. So there, it's going to take me 2 turns to reach the bridge, and I can do that easily enough. No stamina used because I'm walking, so walking is free. Now let's switch to running and turn back around. So if I wanted to run back to where I was, that only takes 1 turn. Because running effectively doubles how far you can move per turn. But the trick is the number of movement points you spend is then deducted from your stamina bar. So let's see that in action. As the unit runs to there, it's using some of its stamina. This unit's really OP actually, so it barely uses any stamina. There's a hidden stat, because we all love hidden stats, called fitness on the unit, which basically determines the translation between how many extra movement points you used and how much stamina should be deducted as a result, and how fast you get stamina back. So if the unit now stands still and does nothing, you see its stamina comes back. Let's find a unit that's not OP, and we can have a look at hills. So that was a development of that height map which I showed you earlier. Here are Crusaders back from the first video. So let's have a look at how this works. So you can see there, it's going to take him 3 turns to move 3 spaces, but this guy has enough movement points normally to move 3 spaces in 1 turn. So the reason that's taking 3 turns is because it's reading the height map and it knows that each tile is above the next one, so it's applying a penalty to movement. So now it has to slowly get up that hill. But of course, once it's up the hill, to move the tiles on the same level is still fine. So it can still move 3 tiles on that level. It's just moving up. And then moving back down is easier. So there you go. For going down, it can go all the way down. So it's actually moving 1, 2, 3, 4 tiles there, because it got a little bonus to the movement points, or a deduction on the cost of moving because it went downhill. So there we go. I think the only other thing to demonstrate is something I mentioned last time. You might remember last time, in month 1 I said there's a system for moving multiple units at once, but it barely works, so I didn't demonstrate it. So now, with our exciting map, we can demonstrate it a bit more with all these units. So let's take these ranged units here. So here's what we do. I've got 5 units selected. So just like with 1 unit, it's probably barely visible, so let's zoom in. I have this little thing saying what direction to face, but you might notice I've got this thing going off to the right of my selected point. And those little grey boxes, which are barely visible and probably need to be sorted out in some way, represent where the other units I've got selected will go. So basically the first unit I selected when I selected those 5 is sort of the lead unit in this group, and it's the one that's going to go where the little yellow arrow is, and the other units will then line up always to the right of where it's facing, and that's the same way that Total War does its drag system, so I just thought I'd use that for familiarity. So if I want my ranged units to stand here near the bridge, I'll do that, and you can see because I've got them all selected, it gives me all these different numbers, and you can't really tell what's going on. And it's the same thing with the line. Like, a lot of these lines are just on top of each other, so it becomes less and less useful to have these systems the more things you have selected. And I'm wondering whether the lines should only be visible for select units as well or something. So let's deselect it to make it a little bit clearer. So there we go, that's where all the units are going to end up. One of them is going to take a long time to get here apparently. That must be the one from the furthest edge, because it's moving through a forest for the first bit, so it probably doesn't get very far. There you go, it only goes 2 spaces, and then it can start speeding up and going more spaces each turn. So anyway, there you go, that's how that works. I can move a line of troops, and they're going to shuffle into position like that. Now one development I want to make, which is the one I was about to make next, but I realised I would probably break everything if I did it, is have something, so say here it's saying it wants to make a line of 5 troops. Have it so that if I move the mouse down here like this, I'm moving it away from the place I originally clicked, that this will change whether the line goes wide or whether it goes deep. So it might be that when I initially click, if I can get it, when I initially fucking click there, and my mouse is close to the point, it sort of forms them up in a box rather than a line, and as I drag the mouse down, the line extends out to the left. You might be interested to know that I'm actually doing a lot of pointing at the screen to try and explain myself, which you obviously can't see, so I don't know how much this makes sense. Yes, let me show you something which I've been working on for the last couple of days, which is we stop, go in again. Now what we want to see, oops, in the same place, basically I've made it so the deployment zone is random for the purpose of testers. There we go. Testing, sorry. So what we've got is a sort of very basic introduction to some sort of AI algorithm where what it's doing is it picks a side of the map to come in, and then it deploys the army for you into what it thinks is going to be a handy formation, and more importantly fits around the passable and impassable terrain of the area where it came in. So this army is coming from this side of the map. It's decided, right, we're going to deploy it around a spot which is sort of 5 spaces up and roughly in the middle horizontally. Then it goes, right, what can we do with this? So right now I've got it so that it will form range lines as sort of front line, then a melee line behind it, and then shock infantry will be placed in groups on either flank, slightly back from the melee line. And it's trying to do that, but on this occasion, the passability of the terrain has messed it up. So this is where a lot of the glitches were coming in. It was trying to make it be able to work around the fact that it can't just lay out the formation as it wants, because it needs to move its decisions around to make sure all the spaces actually can have a unit in them. So you can see what it's tried to do. It's tried to put the range line from there to there, and that's fine for this side, but these 2 spaces are impassable. So it's put the one that would have gone there has moved up there, the one that would have gone there has moved there, and then it's tried to put the melee line from there to there. So now it can't pass here, here, or here because the ranged bit already put a unit in there. So it's shifted all of those 3 back a space. And then it tried to put the shock infantry in. It wanted to put the shock infantry from there to there. Almost worked, but because there was already a melee unit, that unit had to move back a space. And on this unit, this side, it did work. I've ruined the grand finale of going across the bridge because now we're down here. Let's keep restarting the game until it spawns the army up there. No, in fact, let's force it to spawn the army up there. This is a chance to show you what programming looks like if you didn't happen to know. Here it is, I've got my little testing thing, which is to force a spawn location. Uncomment that. Top is 1. Player army deployment edge equals 1. This is the code that does what I've just talking about, makes the army and tries to put it in the right place. So it goes, which side of the field shall it put it on? And does various things to decide what this deployment base is, which is the sort of location around which it will try to decide its deployment. If the deployment base is in the middle of the sea or something, it then does this to try and find the nearest reasonable place it actually could put it instead. And here, what's it doing? It's deciding how many lines of each type of troop we should have. So here, we do a little experiment here. So I've got this thing called standard formation width, which is how wide a line is allowed to be when it deploys. It's saying if you have 10 units, you can put them in a line. But now if I say a line can only be 8 units long, and there are 10 range units and 10 melee units in this army. So now it's going to be forced to have 2 lines of each. So let's see how that affects things. Once we go back in, let's maximize it. So now you can see it's decided on a different formation, because it said, okay, I can't have a line that's 10 units long because the maximum is 8. So it tries to sort of symmetrically cut it down and have more lines. So now it's decided to have 2 lines of 5 for each unit group, like that. Which looks fairly neat. Blah, 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 blah. And by the time it's got to here, it's put all the units in the right place. Long story, bloody short. It doesn't matter. And this is what programming looks like. Here, this is something potentially interesting, is where units come into the game. This is where unit stats are defined in this XML file. So you can see it's not particularly easy to read or anything like that. It's sort of saying, here's a unit name, the Arbalest, its ID 4, movement point, speed, attack, fight skill, armor, troops. So all of its stats are listed there. And this is very difficult to work with, because if I wanted to add a new unit, I have to kind of copy paste an existing unit to then fill in all of the gaps. And if then I decided halfway through development, the units actually need a coolness stat, I have to go to every unit and add a new stat in, one at a time. So what I'm doing instead is using this, which is an XML editor, which basically makes it like a spreadsheet. So now if I want to add a new unit, I just make a new row. And I can say idiots, and their unit ID is 8, and they have movement points of 100, speed 1, attack 100, fight skill 100, armor 100. This is an OP unit. Troops 3, morale 0. They just shatter at the start of the battle, even though they were so good. I guess that's why they're idiots. Let's try and see our unit of idiots in action. Luckily it won't route. Oh, is that it? Let's put it there. Okay, it's messed up in some way. I think it's probably because the number of shock units has gone over the amount of shock units per line. Oh, it might be because I tried to put the line here and it just sort of screwed out, because I've got this sort of get out clause where if you can't find anywhere to put your troops, it puts them in the middle of the field. So that's probably the mess up happening there. But anyway, there are my idiots. So it's very slow because I've given it a speed of 1, but it has lots of movement points. So it can very slowly inch across the field. Now, after all of that delay, we're going to round it back to leave the idiots because they're broken in some way. I was so sort of enthusiastic about having it not glitch while I was attempting to demonstrate it. But too bad. You can see there's no band boxing. I can't just select the entire army, which is something which might get added in. I've got the whole army selected. I'm going to form the army up in a giant line because I can't do anything else. Where's a space possibly big enough to hold them? Maybe here? Now it's going to freeze because it's going to have to pathfind for every unit. There we go. And the pathfinding algorithm is very slow. There we go, the army. Some of them are going to use my bridge. Actually, let's make them run. You'll see what happens, because this distance they're running is too far to run. And when the stamina bar runs out, it basically cancels the running and switches them back to walking until they have enough stamina to run at least one more space, which basically means they need to stop and wait. So select them all, click on that button, all the numbers just shifted because now they're running. Alright troops, run towards the objective. Oh, they're so fast. So half of them are going that way, half that way, because the pathfinding's decided that depending on which side of the army they started on. Oh, we have to wait for the idiots to... Idiots, stop moving because you're delaying the turns with how slow you are. Oh yeah, that's something new. This little icon there to represent when the action mode and things are happening is on and you can't give any new orders. It gets rid of that unit thing as well, so you can have a look. It's actually erroring something down there, index array out of range. I've noticed that before. If you move a lot of units it does cause some errors, but it doesn't actually glitch out, like it still works. So I'm not 100% sure what those errors are. They don't cause the game to stop or anything like that. So now all the units are forming up. You can notice units are allowed to move through each other, they're just not allowed to stop on top of each other, because that's going to make pathfinding a lot easier and avoid a lot of chaos. So there we go. The army is now formed up in a big line in the order that I selected it, basically. From that was the first unit I selected, that was the last thing I selected it. Glorious! Take a bow, the many units of Total War Devin, soon to be renamed. Best game of all time. And there we go. So what's coming next? Let's look at my list. I've got a small list on the table of things to change. Make units form in multiple lines. Oh yep, we talked about that already. Click on a unit ghost to select that unit. I thought that would be a good idea. So if you were here and you saw a ghost and you thought, what is that the ghost of? Like you double click on it or something and it would select the unit that ghost was for, what it was representing. That could be useful. Add unit, class, troop and morale indicators. We've sort of got the class indicator because that's the shape. I want to have here some circles or something to have an easy visual reference for how much morale something has, and possibly write the number of troops each unit has over the top of it, although that might be based on the size of the thing as mentioned earlier. So who knows? Add more of the unit buttons. Oh yes, we need to add like guard, skirmish, fire at will. Half of those things won't actually do anything because there's no combat system yet, but the buttons to operate them need to go in. Oh yes, add small unit cards. That's a pretty big one. You might have noticed this entire area of the screen has nothing in it. That's where smaller unit cards will be, so all of your army's cards will be here, but in a sort of smaller version. So this is a 300 by 500 card, and there'll be a 300 by 300 card for each one, a smaller one, so they can sort of be in rows there, and maybe you can scroll down the rows and select different units. Unit shapes, I already did that actually. Camera rotation, that was something I wanted to add, like the ability to rotate the camera. And you can sort of do this. So here's the game. What I'm going to do is select the camera in the game world, and I'm going to start rotating it by just editing the camera's parameters on the fly. So there we go, you see the camera can just be rotated even though the game is still running, so that's handy. I'm actually changing the game. So I can rotate it to some angle like that, and you'll see the problem is that the numbers are facing the original direction because they're just sort of being drawn over the top and the camera's looking at them. They're not attached to the camera or anything, they don't rotate with it. So we need to make it so everything rotates to face the direction, and then we'll be safe to have some sort of camera rotation system. So there we go. What else we got happening? Oh, AI algorithm. AI algorithm is the big thing at the bottom of the list. I have an idea of how to make the AI for this game and how to make it prioritize like what to do in a given time and how to react to what the player's doing. Be some sort of crazy system of it deciding how important each square is to the battle and then assigning resources to different squares based on how important it thinks they are. And the importance level can change based on what the player is doing. So you can say, the player seems to have gone up onto this hill, so now I'm going to start regarding the squares here as being much more important to me, because suddenly the player seems to be contesting it. And if I can get up there right now, that's an important move, so I don't have to fight the player uphill, that sort of thing. Next time, it's probably going to look pretty much exactly the same, but maybe with some cards here and sort of minor details change, but hopefully it will be better, it'll be less glitchy, there'll be more movement features, more ability to control the army, and maybe, just maybe, I'll have put some enemy units onto the field and they'll be moving about independent of me trying to do something based on crazy AI algorithms that almost definitely will not work, but maybe will one day. I mean, CA haven't got theirs working in, what's it been, like 10, 20 years? So it's pretty hard. But I'm confident I can do it in like 3 weeks. So I'll see you then.